Ever since I made the video on Stickbot Stand, I've been searching for a bunch of Stickbot movies and, Stickbot series made by the fans that are pretty underrated and deserve more attention and are incredible. I have found a lot. Ironically, most of the stuff I've found I have lost the link to. However, in this time, I've also found some stuff that is actually pretty good and I would strongly recommend. So, what you're seeing on screen now, I would highly recommend watching it because it is epic. However, there are a couple shows that I want to find the deepest, most underrated stuff, right? So one of them was this show from 2017, or it was a couple movies made by this guy. He only had a couple of videos and a review of Off the Grid. I have not been able to find anything on this since I watched it, but they were actually really good films for 2017, and he since has left the community. The second, which has recently popped up because he's been getting some attention, thankfully, is Beige Plaws. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. 5 parts. An incredible series which I would highly recommend, and that's what this video is about. However, I want to go over some backstory first and just kind of, yeah. Usually, for a toy or action figure specific stop motion, one of the best things that you can do is to create a movie that is not just a good Lego or Stickbot or whatever movie. You make a good film. Some of the first stuff that comes to my head is like the Magic Portal, the infamous one of the most amazing stop motions of all time, in my opinion. Which, yeah, this is an awesome movie with a crazy history, and I think that this is a really good film. I think that this is a movie that anyone, even someone not at all interested in animation or even like Lego, could have an interest in. With Lego being around for like 90 years and having a huger appeal gap and not really marketing towards a specific audience, there are a lot more opportunities for movies like The Magic Portal to shine outside of just a brick film. With Stickbot, however, it's a lot rarer. The film slash TV series that most people often go to that kind of hits this caliber is Off the Grid. And I mean, they're right. This is a great series outside of Stickbot. However, I think it just misses the mark a little bit, and I don't entirely know why, but there's something about it that just is a little off. What's even rarer, though, than a Stickbot Central series, being a great film besides Stickbot, is a fan film. Very few shows have achieved this. However, the one that most people point to is what's often considered
one of the greatest Stickbot series ever made.
That's right, The Imposter by Stickbot TNT. However, this show it's great, but this is pretty much the only show I can really think of off the top of my head that really, really achieves this, and the majority of the community has simultaneously thought that this is that show. However, I propose a new show that may be tied with TNT's. And this is where I introduce you to 5 parts, a series that has been going on since 2018, which is crazy to me. This was half a decade ago. For the majority of Stickbot's life, 5 parts has been getting consistent episodes, which is crazy. To put in perspective, this is how long all the other shows ran compared to 5 parts. However, we don't know the exact date. So, Beige, if you're watching this and you know the exact date it was filmed or it was published, please tell us. I would love to know, and then we can actually do all this fun comparison Barbara Walters math. So, yeah, when everyone was talking about it via Sulfur Core and Leopold and all this stuff, my first reaction was that it sounded extremely familiar. So I went to look it up, and the new series I had not seen at all. However, I went to the first episode and I immediately recognized it. I remember seeing this back in either 2019 via the re-upload or 2018 with the original one. If it was uploaded then, I just remember seeing this series on YouTube. And with the first episode, it actually does use some pretty revolutionary techniques, especially for 2018 and Stickbot standards. With that being said, though, as you can see now, you can see why it wasn't as groundbreaking as the future episodes would be. So, yeah, this kind of slipped under my radar. And I guess it slipped under everyone else's radar, too. With most episodes averaging between 70 and 100 views, which really sucked, this is a hidden gem. However, if you watch the first episode, you can kind of see why you would skip it. It's kind of cryptic and vague, but there is definitely a charm to it. So if you kept on watching, you would definitely be rewarded. It seems like that Beige kept on getting all these subscribers, but didn't really keep up with the views. Seems like the algorithm really screwed him over, similar to my current situation. However, he pushed through it, and that is just incredible. This is an awesome series. So now, I feel like we should get into it because it's actually going to be quite a long journey. I wrote down notes for this because I was like, oh, this is a long series. Maybe I'm going to need to write down some notes, unlike Stickbot Stand, where this series I could kind of, remember it off the top of my head. And the notes kind of turned out really long. So be prepared for this. If you want to skip the notes and just watch the video on your own, which I recommend because you get no spoilers and stuff, then feel free to, or just skip around. There'll be timestamps, so use those. And yeah, let's begin. Eventually, Blue goes out to a building, and it's like this lab thing. So he goes out to the building and he finds this stand. There's this like ball on it, and then when he adds a drop of water to the stand, and places the ball on it, it like starts to spin and it will spawn a monster. After he gets attacked by the monster, he leaves the lab and goes back to his house. However, throughout the next day, he keeps on having flashbacks, so he wants to kill and trap the monster to, I guess, get rid of these flashbacks. Eventually, in these efforts, he gets teleported to a sort of Himalaya, snowy, mountainy area. And if you haven't picked up on it already, this is very similar to Stranger Things, being heavily based off of it. One of the things that this is probably heavily based off of is that this is basically the Upside Down. However, he doesn't specifically say this, as we will be introduced to that dimension in a little bit. He says that this is an alternate dimension, so take that as you will. Eventually, he starts digging through snow and finds a map that tells him to go across the entire f***ing world to go back home. So it's not a very good map. However, next to him he sees 2 eggs. However, these are not just eggs. They are a fruit that once he eats, teleports him back to his, I guess, universe and dimension, and specifically back to his cabin. Then in the following episode, we are introduced to 2 new stickbots. These are the first other stickbots we see throughout the series. The first one is a green stickbot whose name is Logan. The second stickbot is a pink stickbot who is named Andrew, and these 2 are friends. They go to a lighthouse. Logan, the green stickbot, says that he wants to explore something in the lighthouse, which people have been like kind of just talking. There's mysteries in there that no one's discovered, and so he wants to be the one to discover them. So they go into the lighthouse. Once Logan and Andrew are inside the lighthouse, everything seems pretty normal until the power goes out, and it's pretty spooky. What's even more spooky is when this green light emits. The green light is what also happened when Jason, the blue stickbot, went through the portal, and it's kind of like this light that emits when kind of interdimensional stuff happens. The monster appears and they get spooked. The blue stickbot, which his name is now revealed to be Jason, finally gets back home after eating the fruit and realizes that he needs to get in contact with people because he had some weird stuff happen to him. Eventually, as Jason walks by the lighthouse that Andrew and Logan were at, a scared Andrew walks out saying, "Hey, you need to help us. My friend basically got kidnapped, sort of." It cuts to the back rooms, which is the thing I talked about earlier, where the portal appears. Along with the portal appears Logan, and eventually the green light. So, yeah, along with Logan appearing is the monster, which eventually kind of spooks him. However, he escapes the dimension before any bad really happens. Jason and Andrew meet up by a satellite, just like an old satellite hanging around in the field, and just kind of talk about their experiences. Eventually, the satellite opens and creates this sort of, like, I guess, signal, but more so like a rip in space-time. It transmits to the lab, which we saw previously, now a digital render, which eventually goes to the monster. And it kills him? I'm not exactly sure. This is one of the parts about the story that I'm a little confused on, but I'm pretty sure it actually teleports him away. In the episode prior to the season 1 finale, Jason and Andrew go back to Jason's house, and they see that the sky is very red. It's another Stranger Things thing. So where the monster was, or specifically like took Logan to was the lab, which is why this thing transmitted there. So their plan is to go to the lab and basically free Logan. They go to the lab and trick the monster and basically hold him down, and eventually he dies. So yeah, they save the day. The sky goes back to normal, and that's pretty much it. Jason wakes up in the season finale to a blue moon. He can tell something's up partially because there's a blue moon, but there's just something off. He goes to walk around his house, and we can see a sort of breakthrough in space-time kind of crack appearing, so there's definitely something up. They did not fully kill the monster. Similar to Stranger Things, we see this creature build out of the sky, and it's like a big spooky spider fellow. So yeah. The three meet up and devise a plan to basically build a gun and shoot the creature back into its own portal, I think. The audio is very loud and it's kind of hard to understand. However, this will be fixed as the series goes on, and one of my favorite parts about watching a show like this that spans over a long time is seeing the improvement, and it's really cool. So they finish the gun and eventually hold down the monster and blast him back to his own universe, I think. However, in this blast, Logan gets sent back to the universe with the monster. So, big oops. Starting now in the second season, Steve from Minecraft goes to the lab and tries to start up the machine. However, in this process, it opens and disintegrates him, which is something that I don't remember. I was just like, why did he never appear in the show again? So I'm glad I rewatched it. Cutting to Jason, he goes to meet, I think, Andrew at the lighthouse, and eventually he thinks he sees something in the woods, so he goes to look, but there's nothing there. He's just all kind of confused and eventually just leaves the whole place in general. He eventually comes out of his house because he heard something, and he looks around in the road. He sees a shadowy figure, which is another kind of monster, and it basically chases him down. However, despite his efforts, it eventually grabs him and takes him somewhere. In episode 2 of season 2, we can already see a huge quality shift. Andrew is looking around for Jason because he went missing. So yeah, he's just looking around. He eventually goes to his house and sees his house. However, everything is clean. We'll get back to that in a minute, but just remember that. Also, notice how that light flickered similar to Stranger Things. We catch Jason, who is now woken up by the lighthouse. He gets up and basically follows the same path that Andrew did. So he walks around looking at stuff. He eventually meets someone who is making food. And they're making food, and that's kind of it. They're just making food. However, they talk about a shop that they have. They ask if Jason wants to see the shop, and he declines. While we are not introduced to this character really again, I think he may be an important part. Or if Beige, if you're watching this, I would love for this character to appear again. I think it has some epic potential. Now he finds his house. He walks in, and everything is dirty. Very peculiar. So he cleans it up, and that's that. The camera pans to show the inside of a wall where the monster is hiding. Similar to Stranger Things, my belief is that currently Jason is in the Upside Down, which is why the lights flicker. Starting off in episode 3, this show starts off with something I really like, which is where Jason wakes up and he goes to make breakfast. Now, the thing is, he does this throughout the entire show. There's at least once every season there's an episode of him cooking breakfast. I think in season 1, which I really like. He makes the eggs, I think, almost every time. So it's cool to compare each egg scene throughout the years, and you can see the progression in animation. I really like this, and I think it would be cool if a lot of other shows did this because the progression in animation is really cool to watch. Anyway, so Andrew comes and starts talking to him. They eventually start talking about another monster, which is I think that's the monster that was in the walls, and I think that he actually wasn't in the Upside Down. Maybe the monster messed everything up. It's a little confusing, but eventually they go to the woods and they set a bear trap with a string, and once the monster goes in the bear trap, they'll pull the string and then he gets trapped, and yeah. Well, eventually the monster gets attacked by the bear trap and he falls over. In episode 4 of season 2, the camera quality vastly improves. It seems like they're using a webcam now, but I am unsure exactly. It looks really good though, especially for scenes like this, where everything's kind of tinted gray, and I think it looks really good. Eventually the monster, however, opens up its mouth to reveal a snake-like tongue, and it chases them away until they throw rocks at it, and it eventually leaves. Jason eventually goes back home to find a crack building in his house, showing that there's more coming. Another thing to know about this is that the animation in the previous episode was actually pretty good, having a higher FPS and having more range of motion. However, once this camera is introduced, the range of motion is much more limited, including the FPS. However, it is pretty nice to have a high quality image of these characters now, and I would probably choose this over it. In episode 5, the crack, now hidden by a piece of paper, is revealed to be kind of a wormhole. Jason goes to talk to Andrew to tell him about it, and eventually they too go to the wormhole and they look at it. Eventually they go closer as it kind of like does its aura thing and it sucks them in. They come out back in the snowy dimension, the place that Jason was before where he ate the fruit. Looking around, they're lost, and they have no clue where they are, except Jason knows. So Andrew asks if there's any way to get out. After seeing some monsters, Jason says that he found the fruit, that teleported him back to his home, so they go to try to look for it. In this time, they see what looks to be a town in the distance, so they hike to it and eventually meet a stickbot. The stickbot eventually explains to them that he's been living here, and the other stickbot will be back soon, the other member of, this group. So they wait, and eventually it's revealed to be Logan. This is where Logan has been all this time, in this other dimension, in the snowy area. So, yeah. By this time, they eventually try to leave. However, the other guy gets devoured by the monster. It's never revealed his name, and as I'll talk about this after the recap, but I would really love to have a wiki about this, and I feel like this character would be really fun to explore the lore of, along with the other shopkeeper. However, this guy's dead, so there's only so much you can really do. Eventually, they escape, and yeah. Eventually, the lights flicker as a monster appears, and they strangle it to death. In episode 7, prior to the finale of season 2, Jason tries to encourage the others to go with him to stop the monsters once and for all, but they say no. So he goes to the lab alone until Andrew and Logan come to the rescue because they're like, you can't do this alone. So they go into a hospital type room and see a corpse of a dark green stickbot with lights flickering. The monster fades in and out until it starts chasing them out of the lab. With the animation and quality of the camera really improving, while these recaps may seem like that there's not a lot happening in these episodes, there is. There's actually a lot of atmospheric stuff, and I would say it's really well done, especially for a show from this time. Keep in mind, by the time that this came out, I think that this was still prior to Defenders, or about the time that Defenders Lost Dimensions would have come out, which is really crazy. While I would personally say that this season finale is one of the best Stickbot season finales I've ever seen, especially from this time, I would say it doesn't contain that much important stuff. The main thing is that they trap the monster inside the portal room after Logan leads them to it. They eventually fix the broken machine and vaporize the monster. Also, a brown stickbot randomly runs it and dies. I think he's like a past scientist. But the most important part is that 2 cops show up. A chief and a deputy, sort of. I don't know the full situation, but we'll learn it eventually. And they start to question them, investigate them. Hey, we're going to take you back to the station. We're going to ask you all these questions. However, they are all completely eradicated when a random pink scientist stickbot walks out and says, you don't have to question them, they're with me, I'll clean all this up, don't worry about it. So, kind of weird, but, that's that. Eventually, after they leave and they vaporize the monster and stuff, we get a post-credit scene where the stickbot, the pink one that saved them, says that they foiled his plans. This stickbot will be incredibly important to the plot, and you'll see why now. I know I've said this every episode, but the quality really improves with season 3. This is really amazing. I mean, this was like 3 months before Lost Dimensions 3. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, yeah. How is this guy not in Lost Dimensions 3, but Edbound was? It astonishes me. But anyway, Jason puts up his house for sale, so yeah. Besides Logan and Andrew saying hi to each other, the main thing that happens is Jason goes to see a house for sale. However, house is a bit of it's not really a house. It's like an apartment building, and he buys it for 400 grand. So take this information as you will. But as you have seen, the animation, camera quality, and sets especially have improved dramatically, and it's really cool to watch this progression. From season 2 to season 3 is mind-blowing. I love it. After exploring this mansion for a bit, he notices, well, kind of senses that there's something behind him. He looks back and there's nothing. However, it's very clear that this is also being haunted by some kind of monster. Logan then has a dream, which is where he's in a sort of void. I think he describes as the void, but I don't remember exactly. The best way I can describe this place, as opposed to the previous places, is this is sort of like off the grid, the nightmare realm and off the grid. That's kind of the best way I can describe it, but it's really interesting and it would be really cool if they expand on this in the future. Logan will eventually keep on having these nightmares, being basically the will in this universe, and this shot especially I really like. Logan eventually also has a dream where he sees Jason's house for the first time. He's never been to it, but he sees it, and he also sees a monster looking along with lights flickering. Jason eventually keeps on getting into situations where he keeps on seeing monsters in his house. He meets up with Andrew and they discuss plans to kind of just, Logan's been a little wacky lately, so let's figure it out and let's try to help him. So they invite him to tour Jason's new house. Eventually, we also see this really cool snowy scene where the pink stickbot, which saved them earlier but now wants to kill them for some reason or get payback, is walking through the snow. He gets footprints, and yeah, that is the main scene. However, he will be introduced in the season later on, more so, and he will become a major part. Meanwhile, while attempting to show off the house, Logan just keeps on getting flashbacks to his dreams, now in the place where he was. So, pretty freaky. Eventually, they go outside of Jason's house, and right outside the back, find some weird footsteps in the snow. Hey, I wonder who may have left them. In episode 3, we find out that there are more monsters living in the lab. Eventually, as Andrew and Logan walk back home, Jason forgets and wants to go tell them something. He runs outside, but instead gets teleported randomly out of nowhere. He eventually gets teleported into what I personally believe is the actual upside-down version of this world. The others were kind of just like personal upside-downs, if that makes sense. We see the pink stickbot, or purple actually, talking to him and saying, "Don't you remember what you did to me? I am now gone. My leftover past lies here, and ever after." Yeah. So basically, he cursed him or something. So Jason's trying to figure out who he is, what he did to him, but he doesn't really remember. He eventually wakes up in a doctor's lab in the lab, and looks at a piece of paper saying how to cure an illness, all this stuff about illnesses, curing stuff, blah 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 blah. He also hears a creature forming in the background, but by episode 4 he eventually escapes the lab and goes to talk to Andrew and Logan. He basically explains that he used to work at a lab to cure an illness. However, instead of curing an illness, he created an interdimensional wormhole which caused a bunch of monsters to come through. So, minor slip up. This basically answers all the plot holes, why he knows the scientist, why he knows how to operate the machine, everything. So, yeah. During this time, Logan also tells him about the dreams he's been having, and eventually they all decide to go beat the monster once and for all at the lab. Eventually in the lab they run into this monster, which I believe was the one that Logan saw in the Jason house vision thing. Eventually Jason stabs it with a knife, and the monster disappears screaming. He explains that this doesn't really, yes, it's gone now, but it's angered it even more, and so it's kind of like a temporary way to get rid of them, but it's not foolproof. Eventually, after Logan got attacked, they went back home and for him to, get better. Then they went back to the lab because Jason had an idea to basically build a more powerful portal gun, which would send the monster finally back to its dimension. The blueprints were inside of his doctor, the room that he worked at, the lab. However, they're gone now, and they're basically, well, you can guess who took them. It's the pink stickbot. So, yeah, the guy with the void, and yeah. He takes him to the upside-down version of the lab. However, looking back now, I'm noticing that this might not be the lab, because that lighthouse is where they met the red stickbot, which died in the Himalaya stuff. So this might actually be a different place. Eventually, though, he gives them back the plans for some reason, and, yeah. In episode 6, still in the Upside Down, the scientist talks about how Jason basically ruined his life. He shows him a flashback from 3 years ago where they both were at the lab working on the cure. And Jason looks for the cure, but eventually can't really find it. Eventually, at the end of the day, a clear spot tells him that there won't really be any work tomorrow or tonight or anything, so just go home. Nothing suspicious happening. So, eventually, when walking around at night, Jason notices that the lights are on in the lab. He goes to investigate to notice that there are noises coming from his test chamber. He goes inside, and something is going on. It's kind of unclear, at least to me, what is fully going on, but the machine turns on and monsters come out for the very first time. I don't know how this purple pink stickbot scientist really fits into any of this so far, but it somehow does, so yeah. Eventually, out of the flashback, he defends his decisions, but I don't really know what happened. It's kind of unclear, at least to me. Maybe I'm missing something, so if you know, please correct me. Eventually, after the three wake up on the street after Jason's visions were kind of over and stuff, they're outside of the Upside Down. In episode 7, Jason begins plans to destroy all the monsters once and for all. Jason's current plan is to basically build another machine that sucks everything in, except this time it's a bigger machine that kind of like really works this time. So the gang do what might be my favorite joke throughout the whole series, which is basically where they run to the lighthouse or nearby the lighthouse, go onto a giant satellite dish, ride it down like a sleigh to an abandoned restaurant, and then proceed to build a machine to destroy all the monsters. I love this. But the thing is, they're missing the stand and the ball, which is kind of like the whole. It's like basically like the main, the motherboard and power supply, if you will, for this thing. And eventually, they're like, "Oh no, what are we gonna do?" And then they kind of give up. And then out of nowhere, Jason gets a vision from the pink scientist that says, like, touch the machine, and then randomly the parts spawn in out of nowhere, and then they're good. Now they can use the machine. However, the monster appears and begins to attack. And that ends off the episode prior to the season 3 finale. So the season 3 finale and this episode, the last one we just recapped too, are incredibly well done. However, I'm going to recap them a lot because it's about an hour both together, and it's extremely well done. I think it might be one of the best Stickbot finales ever made, if not the best. It is super well done. The atmosphere is incredible, and I love it. It's really well done. So, with that being said, if you want to watch these episodes without any spoilers or anything like that, I would recommend clicking off now, watching that, and then watching my recap, or watching my recap, then yeah, whatever. So, but for those who are going to stay, I will recap the rest of the series up until when this script is being written. So, with that said, let's begin. So in the finale, after finishing the machine, the monster starts to attack. However, eventually they starve the machine and try to lure the monster in. Then the two cops from earlier, which tried to arrest them and to investigate them, start in a shootout. The monster attacks the dark green cop, and he dies. He's like the chief. So Andrew, Jason, and Logan eventually go to hide in the basement from the monster. Eventually, once the monster is gone, or they think it's gone, they go back up, but the scientist appears. They get into a pretty epic fight, which I would say is really well done. The scientist eventually almost kills Jason by strangling him to death, but Andrew ends up saving the day by hitting the scientist on the back of the head with a wrench. The scientist then wakes up on a beach in what I think is one of the best scenes in the series. I would love if they did more shots like this. It is very cool. There are a lot of like kind of Bionicle references in this, whether they're intentional or not, and I would say this might be my favorite one. Eventually, the scientist wakes up, being very aggravated about all this. The scientist then points out that the parts that he telepathically gave to Jason are now missing. So now it's like a lot less safe, so he can't really fight, and now he needs to find the parts, and it's just this whole mess. Eventually, using sort of telepathic abilities, the scientist almost kills Jason. However, the surviving red cop shoots him away. Eventually, Jason asks the red cop if he knows anything about this, circle and stand thing. And he says that there is one in an old warehouse that I guess the police used to work with. So their plan is to go there while Logan and Andrew keep watch. Eventually they go to the warehouse, which I think is one of the best scenes in the series. So I'm going to talk about it for a bit. This looks incredible. These shots are amazing. I cannot commend it enough. It is awesome. This totally looks like it would come out Off the Grid. When people were complaining about the new season Off the Grid Nightmares not looking enough torn down enough, but like this it has all the atmosphere. I cannot describe how amazing this is. Throughout this whole episode, but especially this part, there's a lot of like tension. The scene lasts for a while, which I'm okay with, and it basically just builds up the anticipation and all the anxiety kind of, which is really well done. While these sets in the show will get better and better, I think that this is one of the best. I cannot describe how much I love this set and scene. It is amazing. So eventually they find the actual ball and stand so they can activate it. and it is done in an extremely fun way. The monster is like there's these monsters around, kind of like surrounding the place, and they're attacking, or like they're kind of like they can sense that they're there, but they can't see them, so they have to quietly like move out the stand and ball, which is like this huge thing, and it's so amazing. Meanwhile, back at the base, Andrew and Logan are basically just fending off little monsters now. It is really well done. Beige mainly makes a lot of claymations and stuff, so that's why probably a lot of this stuff is claymation. The claymations that Beige makes are also really cool, and I would highly recommend checking them out. So the combination of these two things works really well. So you get this really cool fight, which we will see more of in the future, and the claymation and stickbot just works really well. Eventually, Jason and the cop fend off the creature using the orb to zap him back to his dimension. Eventually, the four of them meet up, and they finish the machine. However, Logan blinks out again as the lights flicker, and the scientist returns, saying that the final stage can't be stopped, as a gigantic monster appears. They all go to hide in the basement, but the cop gets pulled out by the creature. The scientist threatens them about killing the cop, but he doesn't. He just kind of pulls him out. So I'm not entirely sure what's his motives. Also, that was a really cool pan. The scientist goes on about how Jason ruined his life. However, maybe I missed it, but there isn't really a point when we really learn why he did it or what he did, which I would love for them to dive into. So eventually, Jason starts eyeing the machine to activate the portal, and the cop senses this. As a clock strikes 12 at midnight, the cop jumps down as a distraction, and it causes Jason to get in time to activate the portal machine, which shocks the scientist. However, he comes out with nothing harmed. What he basically then says is that the key, like the portal device that they've been using all this time to defeat the monsters to send them back to their dimension, is not actually working. In fact, it's working reversed. Every time they send something back, it powers up the monster, and the scientist works with the monsters. I guess I think that's what they're like. So every time they use the machine, he says the monster is not in his control, but it makes another one powerful, kill them, or something like that. It jumps behind them and knocks out Logan and Andrew, and the cop while the cop is shooting at it, and it tries to as the cop tries to fend him off. As this happens, Jason starts with the machine once again, learning from his mistakes, and fights off the scientist. The cop gets killed by the monster, and the gang moves the portal machine into itself, sort of, creating like a tornado bird, shocking the scientist and the creature. Like, in this process, there's a huge explosion until the corpse of the cop is all that remains. Okay, so like they literally like created a tornado of electricity that basically vaporized the cop and monster. That's the idea. So after all this chaos, Logan goes back to look at the lighthouse. Andrew looks at the daily news, and on Christmas Day, Jason watches some TV. And that is the end of season 3. I know I kind of like didn't recap it very well, but I wanted to make it so that way you could still kind of like really enjoy it if you haven't seen it and you want to rewatch it. But yes. However, the last thing in season 3 is a post-credit scene in which we see at some lab an orange stickbot picks up some headphones, puts them on, and then talks to a clear stickbot. They want to start up the machine again that, created the portal. We don't know why, but if I were to guess, these are former employees of the like other lab. Maybe they're 2 different labs. We don't know at this point. But the main thing is they're trying to start the machine that Jason started. Starting off in season 4, we see a dramatic improvement in set quality. Before it was literally like it's just 2D sets, but now they're getting like 3 dimensions, and we're building full streets. It's really cool. At the lab that we saw before, we see the clear stickbot, now in interpolation, which is a nice touch. Usually interpolation doesn't always translate very well for stop motion, but in this case I'd say it actually is done pretty good, besides some mishaps. But basically the clear stickbot that we saw from the post-credit scene goes into an elevator and accesses his lab. We see a bunch of guards, and they go to interrogate a dark gray stickbot. In the interrogation, the clear stickbot asks the silver stickbot about, well, like what, basically the portal, all these questions about it, and Jason. And he refuses to answer for anything. The clear stickbot stops interrogating as he gets beat up and leaves to go to check out some control panel room. We see the headphone, the orange translucent from before, along with the brown stickbot watching over the glass window. Looking through, we see the iconic spinning orb, and it seems to take them to what appears to be the same snowy Himalaya type setting from before. Eventually, the lights go out and a creature emerges, and people start to go into the testing chamber to kill it and get brutally killed as the flashing emergency lights go on. Basically, this creature escaped because they're activating the portal again. It cuts to Jason sitting on a bench looking out at the beach as he enjoys a nice sandwich. Meanwhile, at Stick Mart, we see Logan working and stocking items. We also see Andrew watching TV with a weather warning. In this report, we also see that it takes place in 2005. We also see that the clear stickbot, from before, is looking at Jason's record, like a sheet. And the orange stickbot says that there's no way to replicate what happened with Jason's rift, like the way that he created the portal. So, in this scene, we actually get to see a lot with Jason's record. We get to see when he worked there and stuff. So basically, the show takes place in the early to mid 2000s, starting off in about 2000, 2001, and right now taking place in about 2005. We didn't see Andrew having a dream. Now it's him having these dreams, right? Like, Jason had them, and then Logan, and now it's him. So, the three. Yeah. So, basically, in the dream, he's falling, but we see all these landmarks, such as a clock tower and all this kind of stuff. Andrew calls Jason's Nokia, talking to him about the visions, and eventually he asks him about where a clock tower might be found, or if there's any places, what does the dream mean? He says that there's a clock tower by the end of town, so you could go investigate that. Maybe they have some answers. We then see Logan's co-worker looking for his keys or something in his house when all of a sudden the TV starts to turn on and have this weird static. He gets into this other dimension type he gets into this upside down type place in a snowy forest and gets attacked by one of the monsters. He escapes as one of the monsters gets into a fight with another monster. After leaving the forest, his co-worker is now 85 miles from town and overlooks a cliff and sees clouds and thunder in the distance from the storm that Andrew saw. Andrew eventually makes his way to the clock tower and starts looking around. It looks pretty abandoned, and a black stickbot walks across the street and tells him that you're probably not going to be able to reach the guy who bought it. He just bought the house and just kind of sat on it. So, yeah. Back at the lab, the creature has appeared, but not only the creature, but any proof of it existing. All the bodies that it killed are gone, including the video footage, even the machine that spawned it in. Another thing that I really like about this show is that sometimes Beige will color the stickbots in editing to make them different colors, so that way there's different stickbots. And usually this, for instance, right here, it looks really good. But anyway, in this discussion, they talk about the silver stickbot which was being interrogated, and they refer to him as Arthur. Logan eventually meets Jason and tells him about his missing co-worker. However, if I recall correctly, there wasn't much about, he didn't say if it was specifically related to this Stranger Things type stuff. Andrew then takes a piece of paper and pen from a nearby stickbot and writes a note and ties it to a rock. He sees a quick vision and then throws it at the clock tower. Something that I forgot to mention was that Arthur, the silver stickbot, because he refused to, do the interrogation stuff, he was, they consider the clear stickbot, was okay, we're gonna have to talk to Jason directly. So guards come into his house, kidnap him, and the episode ends. In episode 3, Jason wakes up in cell 27 with Arthur. Now that Arthur is with someone, he wants to escape. So as they discuss the plans, it cuts to Stick Mart where Logan's co-worker has now returned, but is in kind of a state of disarray. His co-worker talks about how the monster kind of found him after the TV static stuff, and eventually, randomly, a stickbot jumps off of the roof of Stick Mart and dies. A sort of demon type thing kind of goes around, so maybe he was possessed or something, I don't know. Back at the cell, they basically prepare for taking out one of the guards once he comes near, and then they'll take his weapon and leave. Once we get into this, I won't really be going into it that much because I want you to watch it because it's an amazing scene. We then meet the gold clickbot, who is the one that's running the clock tower. He finds the note, reads it, and is like, oh my god, it's back, because I guess he's dealt with this monster in the past. We then see a flying demon creature land in presumably the forest where Jason's old cabin was, and I believe this is the one that kind of possessed the guy who jumped off of Stick Mart. Jason and Arthur eventually start to fight their way out of the place, and yeah, So now we are at the final part of the series that is still, like, as of writing this is the last episode. Season 4, Episode 4. So that means that if it is true there are 5 parts, i.e., 5 seasons, then we may potentially see about 12 more episodes. So I'm gonna kind of skim over this part of it because, like, I want you to watch it. But basically, some creature, it might be the bat thing from earlier, kind of gets the building and basically attacks everywhere, and it makes everyone go crazy. Almost everyone in the lab is dead, and the orange stickbot gets mad at the clear stickbot. Overall, it's just a very bad experience, and everyone pretty much gets killed except for these guys who are trapped in an elevator. It's also revealed that the clear stickbot's name is, I think, Ivor, which in Norse stuff means like the army or leader, like warrior, army kind of guy. So I don't know if this is important, but I thought it would be interesting to mention. I wrote about a paragraph or two just on Arthur and Jason escaping the lab, but I'm gonna kind of skip over that because I want you guys to watch it, and it is really good. But anyway, Andrew and Logan meet up, and they talk about rescuing Jason from the lab because he was kidnapped with a car. They say that it's actually, I'm pretty sure it's the car. I'm pretty sure it's Jason's car because he used it earlier to buy the house and stuff. So yeah. So eventually, back at the cell, Arthur escapes because Jason told him to, and when all hope seems lost, somehow Jason gains the abilities of like the Emperor and basically zaps the guy to death. He escapes, and yeah, after they all escape, Andrew gets a call from the lighthouse guy whose name is now Mick, who basically tells him to meet him at this time, and Arthur recognizes the name. So Arthur decides that he should go with Andrew to meet Mick for the first time because they know each other and stuff. While Jason and Logan hang out at the house because they're tired and stuff. Jason has a spooky vision of the future depicting Ivor basically controlling all these monsters and just the worst. At the beach at the lighthouse at sunrise, Andrew meets Mick, and he explains that Mick knew 3 people who have now moved away, but they saved the day and fought off monsters between 1998 and 1999, about 2 years before Jason was hired there. So, like, basically, they fought the same thing, but it was just earlier. Mick, the clock tower guy, explains that they have now gone to Pennsylvania, and the rest of the original crew who helped destroy the original Monsters of the Night, they've all moved to Pennsylvania. So they decide to go to Pennsylvania to recruit them for this mission to finally defeat the creatures once and for all. So as they set up to Pennsylvania, Jason and Logan go to Jason's old house, which has been it's been remade in like a more modern style, which I really like. And yeah, they go because Jason saw it in his vision that it was like all spooky and stuff. In New Hampshire, the gang stop at a like Dean's. At Dean's, Andrew asked them what their first experience with the portal was. Mick says that his first experience was, I think, in the early 80s, and it was basically where he randomly saw it on his porch. He went into it, and there was, like, now he's in the Himalayas, like before, and he goes into this, like, sea, and it's super cold, so he sees a cave with a green glowing thing emitting. He walks into the cave, sees a machine, touches the machine turns on, monster appears. That is that. So eventually he escapes somehow, and, yeah. Arthur had a similar interaction, but basically, once you touch the machine, you get the visions. Eventually, Logan leaves like the cabin to go look around, and he finds a bunch of dirt. He digs it up, and he finds a dead corpse. He then starts to run back to the cabin to tell Jason that he found something very odd. However, Jason also experiences something odd when a monster is in the cabin. He has to run from it and eventually meets up with Logan, and they both try to tell each other stuff, but they're in a panic. And it ends with a very epic shot, which I really like, where Logan, with the gun from the cop that he found dead or something, now shoots the monster as it jumps, and it looks really cool. And so, that is the end of the series so far. As of making this, Chapter 5 of Season 4 of 5 parts is in production right now, mainly with the writing stage. So now, would I recommend this show? Yes, absolutely. This show is incredible. One of my favorite parts about shows like this, and something like Lucas King Animations does, is that, like, the progression. Like, to see, like, the first episode, and then to see, like, the newest one, whether that's in a 2-year or 5-year span, is incredible. And it's really fun. For instance, here's the first episode compared to the newest episode, and it's awesome. A lot of people, they would not continue a series that they started 5 years ago, but this guy did. And Beige, you have made it so incredible. Like, you have built off of it, probably, like, you have managed to, like, look, how this is one of the longest, like, note takings I've ever made. And how this is incredible, and I cannot commend you enough for this. Despite being very based off of a property similar to Tales of the Strange, it doesn't feel as confined. It doesn't feel as corporate, if that makes sense. It feels like there's a place to experiment, and I think that is where this show really hits. It's so good. I cannot describe this. I really love this show, and yeah. But the thing is, this show is really underrated. With a lot of the episodes of the original first two seasons getting about between 50 and 100 views, it really sucks. It seems like that the algorithm just did not let this show pick up, which is not very cool. And it never really got the chance. But he kept on pursuing. Beige, you kept on making these videos, and it got really good. Now, a big question I'm probably going to be asked is, would you recommend watching the entire show? And I'd say yeah. I think that this show is really good. While the first couple seasons are definitely a bit rough by today's standards, they're still really good. However, I would say that, the plot stuff, like, you don't really need to know it, but I would recommend watching by episode 7 of season 3. I think by then, you're pretty much good. This video should also help as a recap if you don't want to watch the original seasons, but I think that if you enjoy kind of looking at the improvement in the animation and all that stuff, you'll really enjoy it. And yeah, I would totally recommend this. I'm struggling to come up with words like to describe like the the nature of this, because it is like it's so amazing. And I mean, the show's been going on for like literally half a decade. But yeah, it feels like I remember a bunch of people talking about how like Defenders and Lost Dimensions pioneered all this stuff, and I feel like this show does it too really well, having a lot of interesting techniques, such as in the first couple seasons using a lot of like they'll use a screen, they'll build like a set on like a 2D set in whether that's Google Slides or PowerPoint or whatever, and then they'll put the stickbot behind the screen, and then that's the set for the video. And there's a lot of stuff like that where it's really creative and really well done. I would say though that there's a point to start. I'd start with season 3, episode 7. That's probably like a good starting point, I'd say. And in the finale of season 3 and pretty much onwards, there's a new thing each episode that's really creative and really well done. And yeah, I really like it. It's hard to explain, and you kind of have to watch it for yourself to really experience it. But there are so many elements of the show being so cool. Like, for instance, the white translucent stickbot and the orange stickbot being friends, kind of, or like co-workers, because they came in the same pack. Yeah, with this being like potentially the longest running stickbot show of all time, and definitely longest currently running stickbot show, it would be really cool to talk to Beige about all this. And if you are watching this, I've been seeing all those TBOE interviews and stuff, and I have thought of ideas of a live with Sebastian type show one day, where maybe we interview specifically sticktubers in this community and stuff. And so it would be cool to hear all the insight in how the show was made, the progression over the years, and all that stuff. So that'd be kind of fun. But yeah, I'd love a behind the scenes video. That'd be really cool. And maybe a wiki. But yeah, I really like this, and I would highly recommend it. So yeah, all the stuff should be linked in the description or pinned comment. And yeah, so with that said, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next video. Bye.